Hello there and welcome to another live chapter reading for Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Today I shall be reading from Apcalypse Nope by Deirdre Huesmann. Chapter 1. The mail person screwed up again. Ivy Jean fitted her keys in one hand and fanned her mother's mail in the other. Just her mother's mail, of course. 16-year-olds didn't pay bills, nobody wrote letters in the age of texting, and Ivy Jean had no friends or even cordial distant families to speak of anyhow. And yet, for whatever reason only mums knew, it was Ivy Jean's task to retrieve the mail every day after school. Like Mum didn't walk by the same 5x15 set of mailboxes in the grungy apartment lobby, like Mum didn't have a key. Like Mum somehow believed that this one task would bestow a sense of responsibility unto her only daughter. None of that explained why, for the third time this week, someone else's mail got mixed up in theirs. The same someone, in fact. The old man on the second floor with the crinkled eyes and a white halo for hair. The idea of seeing him again soured her mouth. She'd have to be polite, exchange words, say, "Sorry, Mr. Archangelus, but it seems we got your mail for the umpteenth time since moving into this downtrodden complex." All of it sounded like wasted energy, not something she wanted to do after a long day. Screw it, she could do it tomorrow. Ivy Jean took the mail beneath her arm and trudged to the elevator. She mashed the up arrow, grimacing at the greasy stickiness left on her thumb. Probably one of the unruly toddlers she always heard wailing, "I want to push the button." The elevator pinged, and as the doors opened, two women stepped off. Both gasped, though Ivy Jean had appeared before them like a blade in the night. "Oh," said one, her eyes grew wide. The other grabbed her friend's arm and dragged her away. Ivy Jean tried not to slump in defeat. Mum said poor posture made her look like Frankenstein's monster. Mum might have decent advice, but it didn't seem to matter if Ivy Jean stood tall or slouched. Existing was an exercise in self-defeat when everyone reacted to her the same way. Surprise, then wariness, then running in the other direction. Maybe it had to do with her 6'2" height, or the limp hair that hung around her face like a horror movie curtain, or the dusky pallor of her flesh that indicated she might be close to dead. Or maybe even the black clothes that, whether people realised it or not, made her look smaller because that was what fashion articles said black clothing did. She stepped onto the elevator and thumbed the button for the 4th floor. As always, the doors took forever to shut, so Ivy Jean occupied herself by looking at the ceiling. There, mere inches from her eyeballs, sat a fat black spider, a house spider, if she recalled correctly, large but fairly harmless. It stood stock still, its spindly-legged arch in perfect symmetry, a dark ballerina caught in mid-pose. "Hello," she whispered. The spider said nothing. Then, to Ivy Jean's surprise, another spider wriggled out of the jagged slats of the ceiling to join the first. "Hi," said Ivy Jean. Both spiders said nothing. When a third joined them, the doors finally closed. The elevator shuddered and began to rise. "1, little 2, little 3, little spiders," she a whisper sang. The spiders lowered themselves. Ivy Jean smiled for the first time in 2 days, resisting the urge to giggle as their legs tickled her face. Then, as though recognising her call, more of their brethren joined them. 4, little 5, little 6, little spiders. The elevator pinged. Ivy Jean stepped off, catching a sight of more spiders along the ceiling. With the blistering heat of summer fading to autumn warmth, it seemed these creatures were seeking a new home. She lifted her hand and caught a couple more along her arm. At her apartment, Ivy Jean turned the knob, locked. She jiggled her key in, careful not to squish her new friends, and opened the door. 7, little 8, little 9, little spiders, she continued. She turned to the kitchen and came face to face with her mother. Mum screamed. Before Ivy Jean could react, Mum swatted her. The spider skittled and fell and scrambled. Mum shrieked, stomping in her new clothes. Ivy Jean flinched at the sight of her new friend's guts splashed across the cheap tile and flat-painted walls. The panic over, Mum gasped and pressed a hand to her heaving breast. Her mussed scrubs lent credence to her wild eyes and hair. "What, Ivy Jean?" Continuing the tune, Ivy murmured, "Now my friends are dead." Mum leaned against the wall, staring at the mess in disbelief. She shook her head, looked at her daughter, and retrieved a shaky breath. "Ivy Jean, please, you can't keep doing this." Ivy Jean looked down. Even Mum was shorter than her and retrieved the mail from under her armpit. 2 of the envelopes had stains now. That didn't matter so much compared to the innards of her friends splattered a gruesome Pollock reproduction in the foyer. Got the bills, sorry they stink. Just put them in the kitchen. Shrugging, Ivy Jean complied. Mum followed her the entire 4 steps, 2.5 for Ivy Jean, from the foyer to the sink. A tremulous breath padded the air between them. Sweetie, I know things are rough and it hasn't been the best start to the school year. Ivy Jean shrugged off her backpack and let it fall to the ground with the weighty thud of 1,000 textbooks. Today sucked. But you've got to stay out of trouble this time. This is a chance to start over, you know. I lost my science homework. It was a small white lie. Stuffing it into a city trash can seemed less humiliating than turning in incomplete work. The principal called, said Mum. Ivy extracted her cell phone, a cheap foldable that not even the most unpopular of unpopular kids owned. Plus Olivia spreading rumours again. You said you were disruptive, Ivy Jean. That's the 5th time this month. She told everyone I texted my boobs to her boyfriend. We can't afford to transfer schools again, said Mum. Do you know how many strings I had to pull to get into this ER? Ivy Jean held up her phone. This is the picture making the rounds. Mum glanced and frowned. That isn't you, they're fake. Well, the principal didn't much like my offer to prove it. Mum leaned against the fridge, her small frame seeming to curl in on itself, and pressed her face into her hands. Disappointment. Another emotion Ivy Jean was used to receiving, yet had long since stopped feeling because it took too much mental energy to process, much like anger, excitement and joy. Oh well, it couldn't be helped. After several long minutes, where neither said a word, Mum lowered her hands and forced a smile. Have you tried joining any clubs at least? And please tell me again you didn't try to start a taxidermy club again. Ivy Jean shook her head. I learnt my lesson after Miss Hannah had called CPS on you. Mum grimaced. She was the worst. That at least they could agree on. Ivy Jean almost smiled a second time, but the movement didn't quite make it to her lips. The gardening club looked okay, but they got upset when I put all the crab spiders into a plot instead of releasing them outside. The what now? Crab spiders, you know. Ivy Jean wiggled her fingers. Those white spiders with the big butts that sit in flowers. Mum shuddered and glanced at the tiny greasy gut marks on the floor. I wish you'd find more conventional hobbies. The whole world did, it seemed. Even Piers, who kept tarantulas as pets, seemed put off by the ease in which Ivy Jean could summon wild spiders onto her fingers. I play video games. Horror games, which last I recall you stopped because you said nothing scared you anymore. True. I also read. You read internet articles. It's really not the same as reading a book. How else would I know that embalming requires end sutures, or that a woman got addicted to paint thinner and made a hole in her throat? Also, did you know injecting plumbing fluid into the veins won't actually kill someone? It just hurts. A lot. Those things aren't really conversation starters. Ivy Jean frowned. But yelling about which football team head smashed the other more last weekend is. Why do you want me to be into brutality? Don't start. Mum's back straightened as she took on her parental authority once more. For one, it's not football season yet. And for another, I never said you had to like it. Just try watching it once. If I start getting excited about sports, the world will implode. And wouldn't you just love that, Mum sighed. God, I'm tempted to pull the plug on the internet. Ivy Jean scratched her arm, her nails driving over a tiny yet notable pink scar, courtesy of the last time Mum shut off the internet. Please don't. What if it happens again? Mum rolled her eyes. It won't if you exercise self-control. I blacked out, Mum. You did not. I did, insisted Ivy Jean. I told you, I don't remember that whole week. Mum threw her hands up. That's medically impossible, and so is trying to plug the internet into your body. Honestly, what were you thinking? I blacked out, Mum. For God's sake, Ivy Jean, you did not. And in case you would remember the reminder, coaxial cables do not go into veins. Mum glanced at the stove clock, groaned and grabbed her keys from a small hook on the wall. I'm going to be late. Do your homework before internet tonight and make sure you eat. Her expression softened. I'll talk to the principal tomorrow and see if we can resolve this Olivia problem. Just please keep trying to make friends. Ivy Jean tugged at the thread on her sleeve, wrapping it around her finger until the flesh beneath whitened. Every time she tried to approach people, they freaked out. Those who didn't could only be nice as long as she didn't copy to her default topics or spouted off the more morbid findings of her midnight internet searches. Why didn't more of her peers want to talk about the fascinating process of decomposition, or that there very well could be a child out there with poison ant powers? Still she nodded. Mum leaned up on her tiptoes and kissed her cheek. Call if you need anything. There's leftovers in the fridge and $20 if that doesn't work. Okay. And if you wouldn't mind, please clean up your friends? Ivy Jean sighed. Yeah. It looked like Mum couldn't escape fast enough, her clogs tracking more spider innards on her way out. She didn't even apologise for stomping on the poor creatures. As usual, Ivy Jean was alone, just her own hulking figure, spider guts and sweaty junk mail for company. She wasn't hungry, so she cleaned up the gooey remains and said a small prayer for their tiny souls. Once that was done, she'd leaf through the mail again. One or two looked important, so those she set aside, but the rest were either stuff Mum always tossed or coupons for things they never bought. Ivy Jean squinted at a card-like envelope, while the bills were addressed to Janice Savageau in apartment 409. This one bore the name Gabriel Archangelis in apartment 209. How many times had this dude's mail come to their apartment in the past 2 months? A dozen? More? Just go downstairs and give it to him. That was what Mum always said. But Ivy Jean was tired of hand-delivering the old gal's mail. What was so special about him anyway? There must be something for the university declared that the Sauvageaus needed to keep receiving his mail. Before she gave much thought to it, Ivy Jean took a butter knife from the cutlery drawer and slit the envelope. Maybe there would be money. Money never hurt, and the old guy probably wouldn't miss it. Guilt pulsed through her at this very thought. Why did she do stupid things like this? What if he needed that money? Stupid, stupid, stupid. She shook her head. What could she do now? She'd already opened the envelope. She extracted the card, the textured paper rubbing her fingertips. It felt expensive and looked to be made of creamy vanilla, with gold-embossed letters swooping across the front. Ivy Jean scanned the words, her eyebrows knotted in confusion. The hour is nigh, end times are near. Fulfill your duty, our angel Lumiere. Pestilence thirsts and war awakes. Famine stars and death partakes. So rejoice, angel, for what shall be done. Open your voice and call forth. She opened the card, half hoping and half scared she'd find some beautiful green paper. Instead it was a single printed word, the letters large, blocky, and at drastic odds with the cover. Come. Huh? Ivy Jean scratched the side of her head, startled when something tickled her finger. She drew her hand out and carefully and almost melted at the little friend on her knuckle. You survived. The house spider from the elevator crawled onto the card, its voluminous butt swaying as it walked back and forth like it was underlying the word. What's up, little buddy? The spider continued its walk, its pace quickened, legs almost invisible in its mighty speed. Okay, I don't understand you when you talk like this, she informed the arachnid. Friend turned, stopped, turned, and then continued its frantic underline pacing. Ivy Jean shook her head and carefully turned the card so the spider wouldn't fall. She found no further evidence of what any of the words meant. A prank? Some sort of weird new chain mail? If she didn't send this to someone else, would ghosts hunt her down like some sick version of that horror VHS tape? I don't want to be haunted, she said. The spider twitched its way to her hand and signal leg reached out, touching the tip of her finger. For a moment, though she couldn't see its eyes, Ivy Jean swore it was looking at her. After what felt like a meaningful pause, it went back to the word. What, am I supposed to obey the card? She read the front and then the inside. Come? Something thumped on the wall outside, probably one of the neighbours stumbling around drunk. The front door exploded. Ivy Jean's thigh smacked the counter. Wood splinters pattered on the tiles. Plaster dust wafted through the air, lazy and listless. She stared agape at the door, which was now half embedded in one of the walls. A heavy footsteps down it, along with an ear-grating scrape of metal on the linoleum. She saw the thawed first, then the booted foot, then the dark pants, then the silk-red shirt, and what was that? A cape? A guy who couldn't be any older than her stood in the entrance of her kitchen, a feral grin stretching his lips. He swaggered with more confidence than a 5'3" man ever should, and slammed the pointy end of the sword into the tiles before dropping to one knee. Ivy Jean glanced at the door again, the weighty slab of wood and metal still sticking out of the wall. Was that him? In a guttural voice, amber eyes never leading hers, the stranger said, War, second of the 4 horsemen, at your service. I hope you enjoyed that chapter reading and that you'll check out the book. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.